Let's talk about this article, which is crazy. It's an article that talks about a bill that the president of the United States, who we love, has passed, which classifies anti-capitalism. This is so much here, guys, as a political pre-crime. You know that thing, political pre-crime. You know that category that exists in our society of pre-crime. You guys know that one? You heard of it? That thing where we decide what crime is before it happens? Well, that's where we're at as a nation and as a people. So that's really great. I'm really excited about it. Let me just make the document look good. And this is an article in Jacobin about it by Ben Burgis. It says Donald Trump's new security directive labels anti-capitalist beliefs as a predictor of political violence. So the new security directive we have here in Estados Unidos, which says that anti-capitalism is a predictor of political violence. Meaning that at some level, if you, right there, I see you, you piece of shit, if you exhibit or espouse anti-capitalist beliefs or sentiments at a certain government level, you are doing pre-crime. It's like pre-cum, but for crime. The irony, of course, is left-wing structural analysis actually pushes people away from lone wolf attacks and towards mass organizing for change. This touches back to the violence conversation from earlier, right? That, lone wolf stuff tends to not be a real leftist thing. Although leftists like to, get together and go for it in kind of bigger ways. Shout out to May 68 in France. Donald Trump's designation of Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. It's just crazy too that we're in this world where like Antifa is a thing that just exists in some large scale structural. Are any of you in Antifa? Any of you Antifa members? Is there an email? Is there a website? On top of that, Antifa is not even the name of an organization, although the general label might describe various and disparate small groups that do exist. It's also very funny that Antifa just means anti-fascism. So since we're anti-Antifa, we're, say it with me, the executive order used a catch-all term to condemn a vague set of actors to an uncertain fate. It was almost as, with great fanfare, the president had promised to extrajudicially execute vampires by exposing them to sunlight. Now, he signed, and by he, I mean President Donald Trump, he who will never die, signed a national security policy memorandum called Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence. This is the part of the show where a bunch of you find out that you're pre-criminals, even if you didn't know that you were pre-criminals. So I'm sorry right now for those of you who are about to learn that you're pre-criminals. And the journalist Ken Klippenstein reported this. It directs a new national strategy to disrupt any individual or groups that foment political violence, including before they result in violent and political acts. There's our pre-crime thing, right? We decide what beliefs foment political violence, and then we can pre-arrest, or we could arrest people for doing the pre-crime. Stephen Miller, who lost his shit when AOC called him 410, who's long been one of the most zealously authoritarian members of the Trump administration. Stephen Miller makes me want to get a hair transplant. Like, I'm cool with being bald. I'm pretty proud of being bald, but Stephen Miller being a bald guy makes me want to go to Turkey on vacation and get new hair just so that I'm not a part of any club that Stephen Miller is a part of. That's how bad this guy is. He makes me want to spend thousands of dollars on hair implants. He said this moment marks the first time in American history that there is an all-of-government effort to dismantle left-wing terrorism. The language these people use, they love talking about left-wing terrorism. They love talking about communism. The communists took over Portland. The communists have taken over Chicago. What are we doing, guys? What are we doing? I don't know if he's actually 4'11", but it's funny that AOC said that. Also, it's funny that AOC said Stephen Miller is 4'10", and then he responded, "She baited you, dog." Her whole point was to say that this is such an insecure little man. He's going to get upset when I say this. And then you did, thus proving her right. That's how that works. And explaining exactly why this is oblique, Klippenstein refers to the dystopian science fiction movement. I stopped speaking English midway through that. References the dystopian science fiction movie Minority Report, where people are arrested not for anything they've done, but for pre-crime predicated on people with psychic powers. In the real world case, the indicators of future political violence listed in the report are, okay, I'm going to list these. If you're in the chat, let us know. Wait till I get to the end of the list. How many indicators that you have for pre-crime? Anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the United States government, extremism on migration, which I think extremism on migration probably means you think that like the national borders are problematic and that it's okay that people from other countries come here. Extremism on race, I imagine extremism on race in this context means like you think that white supremacy is real. Extremism on gender, I think you apply to this. If you think that there's anything other than just baby boy and baby girl, if you think that if I say the genders are baby boy and baby girl, and you think there's anything beyond that, I think you're an extremist on gender. Hostility towards those who hold traditional views on American family. That one's weird. Hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on religion. Also, what's the American view on religion? Mormonism? Shout out to Mormons. Or Scientology, the homegrown religions. Hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on morality. I don't even know what those are. Let us know. I'll let you know what my number is. Let's see. I don't want to say which ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, maybe 7 is where I'm landing. Is 6, maybe 7. If you watch this after the fact, do let us know in the comments as well. You know, I'm seeing, we got a 6 right here. We had a reminder to stop being mean to white people. We have 1 million. We have 5. We have 37 as an option. We have around 9. We have a solid, it's so dumb. Now, my favorites on this list, I really love this, is anti-capitalism, anti-Americanism, and anti-Christianity. Let me tell you why I love this. Because I think it can be argued, and I think it can be argued convincingly. Let me get hydrated for this. That if you are Christian in a biblical sense, that you are inherently, because of your faith, anti-capitalist and anti-American, or at least anti-capitalist and indifferent to Americanism. I'm going to tell you why. There's a lot in the New Testament to emphasize things like giving to the poor, a self-emptying spirit, sharing things amongst the community. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. There's a lot of emphasis on the evils that come through wealth and accumulation. All of those are fundamental to the spirit of capitalism. Right? The spirit of capitalism is profit margins matter more than human people, and that we need to prioritize markets. I think there's, the only time we see Jesus involved with the financial market is when he goes into a temple that they've turned into a market and throws tables everywhere and becomes a terrorist, right? So there's enough there, I think, to say that we can associate Christianity with an anti-capitalist anti-capitalist theory. The link to this article is in the chat right now. Anti-American, maybe you could say this one is a little bit harder, but render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. There is an idea in Christianity that one's primary relation is to the community of the church and to the kingdom of heaven, and that supersedes an affiliation with or an allegiance to a nation state or the ruler of a nation state. Old Testament, right? Golden calf. God gets mad when people worship an earthly institution, something that was created by people. So, and this isn't far out shit. I saw someone in the chat bring up, liberation theology. And of course, liberation theology can get us here. But I think even a pretty standard reading of the New Testament can get us to a place where being Christian means to be anti-capitalist and anti-American or anti-nationalist more generally. So it's very silly that here they say an indicator for future political violence is anti-Christianity, anti-capitalism, anti-American, because to be Christian, I think, means to be anti-capitalist and anti-American. Also, let's just say it too, a lot of pretty violent people, a lot of pretty violent people in America identify pretty seriously with Christianity. That might be a thing you've heard about. You heard about that one. You've seen this one. You know this guy. You've seen her. You've seen him. So that one I find particularly thrilling. Also, I like the idea that capitalism is somehow inherently American, which seems silly. I mean, the idea again that like, because if you look at what is implied here, what is implied is that you are a criminal if you are not a nationalistic, capitalistic Christian who worships the state, hates migrants, thinks that white is right, thinks that there's only baby boys and baby girls, that the American family is good, that America perfected religion with Scientology, and that there's American views on morality. I don't even know what that one means. Like, they're just making up a type of guy that they are and saying that that's the only type of guy you can be. Now, Burgis goes on in this article, and again, this is we're looking at the Jacobin article that Ben Burgis wrote. He's riffing off of a report put out by Ken Klippenstein. Says this is at the very least a directive for surveillance and tracking of clearly constitutionally protected speech. Because again, there's nothing unconstitutional about you being like, I don't prefer Christianity or capitalism, not my cup of tea. You know, America, maybe not the best. Thank you, Andrew, because I'm not trying to talk shit about Christians. I'm trying to say positive stuff. You know, we should be able to say that. But this now creates a set of conditions by which people who intellectually, morally, socially, theologically disagree with some of those statements, as Burgess points out here, could be under suspicion for simply holding any one of a list of standard left-wing beliefs, subjectively rebranded as extremism, supposedly predisposing them to violence. Now, I would argue that right-wing Christian nationalism and white Christian nationalism is a much better indicator of a propensity towards violence. But what do I know? You know, do you think American imperialism is a problem? Do you organize protests against American wars abroad? Do you speak out against the American-backed genocide in Gaza? These could all constitute anti-Americanism. Do you want to abolish ICE? You know, that, and like Burgess points out, that seems like what they consider extremism about immigration or migration. He does give Klippenstein credit. He's linked throughout this article. But again, your opinions are risk factors for violence, and by expressing them, you've committed pre-crime. Now, who knows? Like, who knows how far this goes? And Tyler Schmidt points out, yeah, they kind of imply that atheists are terrorists too. Who knows how far this goes or where it goes or how badly they're willing to push this? But it does flirt with setting a legal precedent that not only curtails free speech, it specifically targets the type of free speech espoused by people that are left-leaning or people of color or people that are not from a dominant sort of like white nationalist worldview. Targets those people and makes their speech evidence for pre-crime. Says even militant atheism is being classified as a kind of pre-crime, presumptively linked to political violence. This is almost cartoonishly authoritarian. And unlike the executive order declaring a non-existent organization to belong to a non-existent legal category, it's all too easy to see the path from this to direct surveilling and squelching speech the administration doesn't like. And how private employers, too, could take it as a cue to crack down on employees. You know, self-promotion for a second. My most recent video, I hope you've watched it. If you haven't watched it, I would really appreciate it if you did. If you haven't watched it yet, I would appreciate if you did. I'll do it. I'll link to it in the chat right now. If you're watching this after the fact and you haven't read it, I'll put a link down below. But my most recent video is about the collusion of the Silicon Valley surveillance state and the police state and the government, and how all this is coming together in a way that sucks, or that potentially sucks, and how there's a coherent ideology behind all of this. But yeah, like, it's all in place. Again, I feel like this is the theme of this week's show is me getting borderline conspiratorial, empathy gooning too much, go to crime jail. Hell yeah. But like, all the systems are in place for all of this type of speech to be targeted, you know? Alex, I completely agree with you. So it's all there. It's all in place. And something that I talk about in my most recent video, there's an article. I talk about in the video. It's linked in the video as well. There's an author. He's a UK professor. Again, I mentioned him in the video, who argues that one of the things we might not think about with automized vehicles and rideshare apps in general, but especially autonomous cars, is they produce data that can be tracked. And he uses this example of, like, let's say we shift to the system where we gut public transit and we have autonomous vehicles and buses and shuttles and blah blah blah. Well, what if there's a big protest against government interest? You just shut all the cars down so people can't get there, or you're able to track where everyone's going in their cars so we know who participates in whatever protest or whatever act. It's all kind of right there, which sucks. I wish it wasn't all kind of right there. What might be less obvious is how absurd the core premise is here. The directive's premise is wildly inaccurate. People will hold views that Trump and Miller might label as extreme are not more likely to commit political violence than anyone else. If anything, the opposite is true. Like, Stephen Miller is violence. Stephen Miller incites violence. You want less violence? Get rid of Stephen Miller. In all these cases, left-wing analysis directs people to think in terms of structures of power rather than blaming individual bad actors. This is the point of all of this, right? This is the point of so many things. By putting all the focus on individuals, we're able to obscure structural analysis. If you didn't watch the first part of the show, or you didn't see the earlier video, I kind of talk about this when I got into political violence relative to the situation in Chicago right now. And by the situation in Chicago right now, I don't mean the imminent collapse of the Cubs postseason run. I mean the city being occupied by ICE agents and Homeland Security and Border Patrol and what are they called? National Guardsmen from Tejas. They're acting as if this is all about just people. It's all just a bunch of individuals. And no, shit is structural. Shit is structural. If you blame a health insurance company, deny a claim on a particular executive being a monster, for example, you might think a good solution is to shoot the executive. But if you, and like the point here, I think, is that, and what Burgis is doing here, I think, is pointing out that the logic being used by some of these executive orders and directives is a logic that is not dissimilar from the one that would facilitate a Luigi Mangione type thing. I'm going to put the game on in the background on my phone during happy hour today, so I can watch the carnage unfold. Again, stick around. Happy hour is going to be starting in about 5 minutes. I'm excited. We got a new sponsor. But let's talk about this a little bit more before we get happy. But, this is the logic that facilitates someone like a Luigi Mangione shooting a guy. Whereas a more properly leftist structural analysis is to say that, like, yeah, the guy that runs these companies, pieces of shit, bad guys. But the issue is the structures that facilitate those systems, not the individual bad guy. Because, of course, when Brian, whatever his name, got clapped by Luigi, it's not that United Healthcare was just like, oh, we're good now. We were bad because of him, but now we're good. No, it's enmeshed in a system. And if there is a theme of almost everything I've made this year and everything I've talked about and everything I think we should be thinking about, it's just the constant evaluation of systems and structures and reminding ourselves that there's always this like immediate pull to focus on the actions or beliefs of the individual. And we saw this with the reaction to the Kirk shooting, and it all distracts from thinking about systems. Burgess goes on to say, but if you understand the problems with the American healthcare system are endemic to the system, such that whoever gets the job of the man can shout. Okay, I'm going to go sign a package. I'll be right back. Sorry, man, my Antifa starter kit. I'd ordered my Antifa starter kit and it just came in the mail. So now I have my Antifa starter kit. Antifa starter kit has been acquired. Sean says they don't want us cognitive mapping. That's it. That's it. You can't kill a bad social structure with a gun. You need mass political action to reorganize the society. You need mass political action to reorganize the society. You need mass political action to reorganize a society. Trump's, the point here, one of the most absurd points Burgess points out is the case of anti-capitalism. If the reason wealthy capitalists exploit people is not because they're individually evil, but because of their particular class interest, the individualistic acts of violence like assassinations are beside the point. And, he ends with a little Marx, which we love. This is from Capital. He quotes Marx as saying, "To prevent possible misunderstandings, let me say this: I do not by any means depict the capitalist and the landowner in rosy colors, but individuals are dealt with here only insofar as they are personifications of economic categories, the bearers of particular class relations and interests. My standpoint from which the development of the economic formation of society is viewed as a process of natural history can less than any other make the individual responsible for relations whose creature he remains, socially speaking, however much he may subjectively raise himself above them." Pointing at individuals and making structural and political problems about individuals and individual actions is great for content. It's great for news. It's great for keeping us distracted. It's great for making us really angry, but it keeps us pacified. It keeps us just participating in the same systemic feedback loop, the digital advertising algorithmic feedback loop that doesn't do anything. We just get so mad about individuals. When Marx talks about this stuff, it's never about saying this guy is bad or that person's bad or this group of people are bad. Sure. Are there people whose consciousness and sense of history and sense of morality get structurally shaped in ways that make them suck ass? For sure. But Stephen Miller isn't an anomaly. Stephen Miller is a product of a system. Pam Bondi is not an anomaly. Pam Bondi is the product of a system. The people signing up for ICE who think they're doing something good, it's not just that those people are specifically immoral. They're a part of a system. They've signed up for something. So I think it's important to note that. And I've talked before about like the moralism you get in Marx. And he has a quote right here too from Trotsky about why Marxists oppose individual terrorism. But yeah, I think he notes that it's absurd to treat anti-capitalism and similar structural analysis of power relations as an indicia or indicator of violence, because of course being anti-capitalist isn't being murderous towards individual proponents of the capitalist system. It is carrying out structural analysis, cognitive mapping, maybe, that helps us understand this sort of stuff. Okay. You can check this article out. It's by Ben Burgis. It's in Jacobin, which sometimes publishes weird stuff. It sometimes publishes cool stuff. He links to the original report by Ken Klippenstein in that you can check out if you want, but you don't have to. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do in this life, friends. But I think it's important, and I think it's crazy. And what an era that we live in. What an era that we live in.